There are 9 plants sitting in your garden right now that are quietly setting a trap for next spring, and you have less than a week to defuse it. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly which 9 perennials need to come down before September 1st, the exact pest or disease each cut stops in its tracks, and the precise height to cut each one so you don't overdo it or underdo it. If you want that full list, with real cutting heights and the actual science behind why this window matters, stick around and hit subscribe now, because I'm going in order from the plants most people already know about to the one almost nobody gets right. I've been growing and managing perennial gardens for over 25 years, and if there's one mistake I see gardeners make every single autumn, it's treating all fall cleanup as one big task they can get to whenever. They wait for the first frost, they wait for a free Saturday, they wait until the whole bed looks dead. And for some plants, that's actually fine. But for a specific group of perennials, that delay is exactly what the pests and pathogens are counting on. Here's what's really happening in your garden right now. As the days get shorter and nighttime temperatures start dropping below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, your perennials go through a hormonal shift. They start pulling sugars out of their leaves and stems and pushing them back down into the roots and crown to store up for winter. That's a good thing, that's how they survive the cold. But at the exact same time, every fungus and insect that's been living on that plant all summer is racing to finish its own life cycle before the plant shuts down. Fungi are forming hardened survival structures in the dying tissue. Insects are laying their eggs directly into the soft, collapsing stems. Once those structures are set, once those eggs are in place, they're going to sit there all winter and reinfect your garden the moment things warm up again. That's why late August, before September 1st specifically, is the window that matters. The soil is still warm, somewhere between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which means when you make a cut, the plant can actually seal that wound quickly through a process called suberization. Wait until October or November when the soil has gone cold and wet, and that same cut just sits open, an easy entry point for rot. So this isn't an arbitrary date I picked off a calendar. It's the last real window where cutting back does more good than harm. Your local garden center isn't going to tell you any of this, because by the 3rd week of August, they've already swapped their shelves over to mums and pumpkins and fall wreaths. Nobody standing at that register is going to walk you through the life cycle of a leaf spot fungus. That's fine, that's not really their job. But it does mean this information tends to just not reach people until the damage is already done. Drop your hardiness zone in the comments before we get going, because timing does shift depending on where you garden, and I'll be calling out those differences as we go through the list. And here's a preview of what's coming. Plant number 3 on this list is the one I get asked about the most, because the damage happens underground, where you can't see it, until the whole root structure has basically turned to mush. I'll walk you through exactly what that looks like a little later on. Number 1, peonies. If you've got peonies in your garden, take a close look at the foliage right now. Are you seeing any blackening at the base of the stems, or a fuzzy grey coating starting to show up on the leaves? That's grey mold, known scientifically as Botrytis peonii, and it's one of the 2 major fungal threats peonies deal with this time of year, alongside a related pathogen called Sclerotinia sclerotirum. Here's what's happening biologically. As the foliage starts to decline in late summer, the fungus growing on those leaves begins forming small, hardened survival structures called sclerotia. Think of them as tiny fungal time capsules. If you leave that foliage standing, those sclerotia either drop into the soil around the base of the plant, or worse, work their way down into the crown itself, where they'll sit through winter and release fresh infectious spores the moment the weather warms up next spring. The fix is straightforward. Cut peony foliage all the way back to 2 to 3 inches above the soil line, and do it before September 1st, while the fungus is still confined to the leaves and hasn't had a chance to migrate down into the crown. This part matters just as much as the cut itself. Get every single piece of that debris off the property. Don't leave it in a pile next to the bed, and don't toss it in your home compost unless you can genuinely guarantee your pile holds a sustained temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, because that's what it actually takes to kill off sclerotia. Most backyard compost piles never get anywhere close to that. Number 2, Daylily. Daylilies are usually one of the easiest perennials in the garden, which is exactly why people tend to ignore them at cleanup time. But by late summer, a lot of daylily clumps are dealing with leaf streak fungus, caused by a pathogen called Oreobasidium microstictum. You'll spot it as yellow streaking that runs along the midrib of the leaf, and if it's left alone, the whole leaf eventually collapses into a soft, mushy mess. That collapsed foliage is the real problem. Once it goes slimy, it creates a wet, low-oxygen layer sitting right on top of the crown, which is exactly the kind of environment that fungal spores love to overwinter in. It also makes spring cleanup genuinely unpleasant, because now you're dealing with a rotted mat instead of dry, easy-to-remove foliage. Cut daylily foliage back to about 3 inches above the crown in late August. That height gives you enough clearance to protect the crown itself while still removing all of the infected leaf tissue. If you're in a colder climate, this step matters even more, because that wet foliage left standing can decompose into a slimy layer that actually suffocates the crown once snow sits on top of it for weeks at a time. Number 3. Garden Phlox. This is the one I mentioned earlier, and it's a great example of how a problem you can literally see with your own eyes still catches people off guard every single year. If your garden phlox has that dusty grayish-white coating across the leaves by August, that's powdery mildew, specifically a species called Golovinomyces sycoracearum, and it thrives in exactly the conditions late August tends to produce: warm, humid days followed by cool nights. Here's the part most people don't realize. The fungus doesn't just disappear when the leaves eventually fall off on their own. It forms tiny survival structures called clestithecia. And those structures overwinter directly on the fallen leaf litter and on the standing stems themselves. Come spring, they release new spores right back onto the fresh growth, and the cycle starts all over again, usually worse than the year before. Cut phlox stems back to 2 to 3 inches above the soil line before September 1st. While you're in there, take a look at anything crowding the phlox from nearby, other perennials, self-seeded volunteers, anything blocking airflow, and trim that back too. Powdery mildew spreads and thrives in still, humid air, so improving air circulation around the base of the plant is doing just as much preventative work as the cut itself. Number 4. Black-eyed Susan. Black-eyed Susan, especially the popular Rudbeckia fulgida, goldstem variety, is prone to septoria leaf spot, caused by Septoria rudbeckii. It starts small little purple-brown lesions scattered across the lower leaves, but if you don't intervene, those spots spread upward until the entire plant's foliage has gone black and collapsed. The fungus survives the winter directly on infected stem tissue and in the fallen leaf litter sitting around the base of the plant. Left in place, it's basically guaranteed to reinfect the new growth as soon as it emerges in spring, often more aggressively than the year before. Now here's an important distinction I want to make, because I don't want you cutting back every single Rudbeckia in your yard without thinking about it. If your plants are healthy, green, and free of spotting, you can actually leave them standing right through winter. Those seed heads are a genuinely good food source for finches and other birds through the cold months. This cut is specifically for plants showing symptoms. If you're seeing those purple-brown spots or blackened leaves, cut that plant back to 2 to 3 inches immediately. Healthy neighbors nearby can stay put. Number 5. Garden Mum. Garden mums deal with a threat that's a little different from the fungal problems we've covered so far. It's a microscopic roundworm called a foliar nematode, specifically a Phalanchoides rhizomabosi. These overwinter inside the plant's dormant buds and in the debris sitting at the base. During the growing season, they actually swim up the stem in a thin film of water whenever the foliage is wet, then feed inside the leaf tissue itself, which is why you'll see distinct wedge-shaped brown patches trapped between the leaf veins, a pattern that's honestly pretty easy to spot once you know what you're looking for. Here's the tough part about foliar nematodes. There isn't a reliable home treatment for them. Chemical options are limited and often not practical or available for a typical backyard gardener, which means sanitation is genuinely your best and really your only defense. Cut garden mums back hard, down to about 1 to 2 inches, before September 1st, and clear away every scrap of stem and leaf debris from around the base. This strips the nematodes of the habitat and pathway they need to survive winter and reinfect the fresh shoots that come up in spring. Number 6. Catmint. If your catmint has flopped open into a sprawling mess with a bare, woody center by this point in August, you're not alone. That's completely normal for the plant at this stage. But that leggy growth also happens to be a favorite target for the 4-line plant bug, Poecilocapsis lineatus. In late summer, the females lay small banana-shaped eggs directly inside the plant's hollow stems, and those eggs sit there through winter, hatching the following spring to feed on whatever fresh growth comes up. The good news here is that the fix for this problem comes with a genuine bonus. Shear catmint back to a tight framework of about 4 to 6 inches. That removes the stems where the eggs have been laid, but it also opens up better air circulation around the crown, and within a few weeks, triggers a fresh flush of that fragrant silver-green foliage, along with another round of lavender blue blooms that can carry you right through to the first frost. So this one isn't purely a defensive move, you're also setting yourself up for a second bloom. Number 7. Garden Aster. Garden asters run into a combination of 2 problems this time of year: powdery mildew and an insect called the chrysanthemum lacebug, Corythucha marmorata. The lacebugs feed on the undersides of the leaves, leaving behind a yellow stippled pattern across the top surface along with small, dark, tar-like spots of frass, which is really just their waste, left scattered across the foliage. Both of these problems rely on the same thing to survive winter: dense, unpruned late-season growth. The fungal spores overwinter on the stems, and the adult lacebugs tuck themselves into that same thick foliage for shelter. Thin out the stems and cut asters back significantly, roughly by half to 2/3 of their current height, in late August. Beyond removing the insect population and fungal material directly, cutting back that overall bulk also reduces humidity trapped inside the remaining canopy, which makes the whole area a much less hospitable environment for mildew spores trying to germinate. Number 8. Bee Balm. Bee Balm, or Monarda, is one of the classic powdery mildew magnets in the perennial world. You'll recognize it by that same white, powdery coating we talked about with Phlox, and it thrives here for the same reasons: high humidity, crowded stems, and stagnant air sitting low in the planting. Cut Bee Balm stems back to about 2 inches above the soil line before September 1st. This removes the pathogen before it gets a chance to release its overwintering spores. And just like with the other mildew-prone plants on this list, don't stop at cutting the stems. Clear away the fallen leaf litter from around the base too. Mildew spores travel easily on wind and on splashing water from rain or irrigation, so any leftover debris sitting on the soil surface is a direct pathway for reinfection come spring. Number 9. Hosta. Hosta is a genuinely different kind of threat compared to everything else on this list, because we're not dealing with a fungus here, we're dealing with slugs, specifically the grey field slug, Deroceras reticulatum. These pests feed on the low, damp leaves of the hosta, and in late summer they lay clusters of translucent eggs directly inside the decaying foliage and in the mulch surrounding the base of the plant. Cut hosta leaves back to 2 to 3 inches above the crown, and while you're at it, clear out the old mulch sitting around the base too, since that's just as much of an egg-laying site as the foliage itself. Removing both eliminates the primary places these slugs choose to overwinter their eggs. One important detail here, and this is different from most of the other plants we've covered: do not cut hosta stems flush to the ground. Leave that short 2 to 3 inch stub in place. Those stubs actually shield the plant's crown bud from physical damage and from the freeze and thaw cycles that happen through winter, so cutting too low here can actually leave the plant more exposed, not less. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel isn't doing the generic, surface-level fall cleanup advice you'll find everywhere else. If that's the kind of detail you're after, go ahead and hit subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next. Now let's get back to the tease from earlier, because bearded iris deserves its own moment here. Even though it's not technically one of our 9, it's too important to leave out. The iris borer, scientifically Macronoctua onesta, is a moth that stays active right through late summer, and it lays its eggs directly on the senescing leaf blades of the plant. Once those eggs hatch, the larvae don't just feed on the surface, they tunnel straight down inside the leaf blade, working their way toward the rhizome underground, and that's where the real damage happens, completely out of sight. Once the larvae reach the rhizome, they open the door for a secondary problem that's actually more destructive than the borer itself: bacterial soft rot caused by Pectobacterium carotivorum. This bacterium can move into that damaged tissue and essentially liquefy the rhizome from the inside out. You won't see a thing wrong above ground until the plant suddenly collapses, and by that point, the rhizome underneath is already gone. Now, I'll be honest with you, some sources will tell you to wait until after the first hard frost to cut iris back, since that gives the plant more time to pull carbohydrates down into the rhizome for winter storage. That's not wrong for a completely healthy stand of iris. But if you've got an active borer problem, cutting back in late August is the stronger move, because it removes the leaf blades before the moth can finish laying its full round of eggs, and it gives the rhizome a warm, dry window to heal any damage before cold, wet conditions set in. Think about how many plants you've personally lost, or had to replace over the years to something that a 5-minute cut in late August would have completely prevented. If this list has been useful so far, go ahead and share it with anyone you know who's been fighting a losing battle with their perennial beds, and if you haven't already, now's a good time to hit subscribe. Here's the piece of this whole process that gets overlooked more than anything else, and it can genuinely undo all the cutting you just did if you skip it. Your pruning shears are a vector. If you cut a peony that's infected with grey mold and then move straight to a healthy plant without cleaning your blade in between, you can inoculate that second plant directly through its fresh cut, the exact same wound that was supposed to protect it. Sanitize your tools between plants, either with a 10% bleach solution or a 70% isopropyl alcohol solution. Bleach works well, but it's corrosive to metal over time, so isopropyl alcohol is often the more practical choice for regular field use since it acts fast and won't pit your blades. Either way, spray or dip the blade and let it sit for at least 30 seconds before moving to the next plant. And please, don't compost this material on site. I know it feels wasteful to bag up a whole pile of foliage and send it to the trash, but standard home compost piles almost never sustain the 140 to 160 degree Fahrenheit range needed to actually kill off Sclerotia, powdery mildew clestothecia, or nematodes. If you compost infected material and spread that finished compost back onto your beds later, you're just reintroducing the exact problem you cut back in the first place. Bag it up for municipal trash pickup, or burn it if your local regulations allow for open burning. One more thing before we wrap up, because I don't want you walking away thinking every single perennial in your yard needs to come down right now. That's not the goal here, and honestly, a completely bare garden isn't doing your local wildlife any favors either. Healthy native plants like purple coneflower and wild bergamot should be left standing right through winter. Their seed heads feed songbirds, and their hollow stems give native bees a place to overwinter. And if you've got warm season ornamental grasses like miscanthus or pennistem, leave those alone too. They only grow new roots in warm soil, so cutting or dividing them now just leaves them vulnerable to rot once the ground turns cold and wet. This is about targeted intervention, not a scorched earth approach to your whole garden. Let's run back through all 9, quickly, so you've got the full picture in one place. Peony cut to 2 to 3 inches to stop Sclerotia from forming in the crown. Daylily 3 inches above the crown to remove the anaerobic decomposing mat before it forms. Garden Phlox 2 to 3 inches to interrupt clestothecia before they can overwinter on the stems. Black-eyed Susan 2 to 3 inches on symptomatic plants only to stop spore wash down from spotted leaves. Garden Mum cut hard to 1 to 2 inches to strip out nematode habitat in the basal buds. Catmint 4 to 6 inches to remove the stems where eggs are laid and trigger fresh bloom. Garden Aster cut back by half to 2/3 to clear out lacebug winter shelter. Balm 2 inches to stop spore release from the crown before winter. And Hosta 2 to 3 inches, leaving that protective stub in place to eliminate slug egg laying sites in the decaying foliage and mulch. Get through these 9 before September 1st, clean your tools between cuts, and bag up anything diseased instead of composting it, and you are genuinely setting your garden up for a much healthier spring than most of your neighbors are going to get. Let me know in the comments what zone you're gardening in and which of these 9 has been giving you the most trouble this year. If you know someone who's been dealing with the same powdery mildew phlox problem every single August without fail, send this their way, it'll save them a headache. And if you found this useful, subscribe for more of this kind of detail, not the generic stuff, the actual reasons behind why we do what we do in the garden. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.